Now, the Indian PM arrived in Ukraine's capital Kyiv on a day-long visit to Ukraine. The Prime Minister arrived in Kyiv from Poland on board a Rail Force One train in the second and final leg of his two-nation trip. Prime Minister Modi is the first ever Indian Prime Minister to visit Ukraine since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two nations. Upon reaching Kyiv, the PM received a warm welcome by the Ukrainian Indian community. He is visiting Ukraine at the invitation of President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The day also saw Prime Minister Modi paying a floral tribute at the statue of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the Indian nation. Prime Minister Modi and his visit to Ukraine comes nearly 6 weeks after his high-profile trip to Moscow. Prime Minister Modi has always made a strong appeal for peace. You can see a hug for Prime Minister Modi that he gave to President Zelenskyy, and this is a shot where they are paying homage to the braves of Ukraine, it seems. A solemn occasion indeed. Certain audiovisual elements there for the Prime Minister to witness. Now, India's PM has met, as you could see, Ukraine's President Zelenskyy. Both leaders have honoured the memory of Ukrainian children at the Martyrologist Exposition in Kyiv. Martyrologist Exposition stands as a testimony to recall those who lost their lives in the conflict. So these are the images that have come in from the Martyrologist Institute, and where Prime Minister Modi has met, as you can see, President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. And this is quite a solemn visit, as you can make out, where there are exhibits, audiovisual and others, of people who've been martyred in the conflict. Prime Minister Modi has been very clear right from the start when this conflict began, and there's a reference to that in this place as well, that there is no solution that emerges from the battlefield, and that the way forward has to emerge from dialogue. He's repeatedly said that India and there are many other countries that are willing to work with all sides to ensure that that sort of a dialogue takes place, which can ultimately lead to a path towards peace. This is the Martyrologist Exposition in Kyiv, where Prime Minister Modi and President Zelenskyy have met and have been together through this exposition as well. My colleague Jessica Taneja now joins us from the newsroom. Jessica, very solemn pictures indeed here, and I'm sure the message that Prime Minister Modi will ultimately deliver, and we'll get to know about it as well, I'm sure, pretty soon through the course of the day, is what he has often repeated about any sort of conflict that is at the moment unfolding in the world, be it in Ukraine or in the Middle East or West Asia.
And as As we've seen the Prime Minister reiterate the words in various multilateral forums, not just his arrival in Ukraine, but you remember 6 weeks ago in Russia as well, when the Russian missiles had struck a hospital in Kyiv. That was a devastating moment for Ukraine, and the Prime Minister had said that this kind of violence is no place in society, and solutions cannot be found on the battlefield. And preceding, of course, that the Prime Minister had said earlier, where this is not an era of war. So given the kind of statements that have been given from the Indian side, it is pretty much clear the fact that where it stands on the conflict, it wants to engage, it wants both sides to engage in dialogue and diplomacy, and that is perhaps the only resolution in sight. But of course there are challenges to it, and challenges that haven't been able to, that many of the sides who are trying to mediate a peace process between the two haven't been able to achieve in the last many years. In fact, not just recently, but from the previous Minsk Accord as well. A lot has not been settled when it comes to territorial expansionism in the region.
Yes, Jessica. We have been seeing these images again. This martyrologist exposition really bringing to home all that has been going on since the conflict began, and clearly this is something that has been playing on the minds of a lot of people around the world as well, and this visit all the more important because of that.
Yes, you know, the visit is being watched not closely, not just at home but also abroad, with India's key allies in the West looking at how this proceeds further. Given the fact that India has put importance in a peace process or a possible negotiation which could bring an end to the conflict, not necessarily as a role of a mediator, but of course as one of the leaders who could play a key role when it comes to helping both sides come to a particular solution, or at least across the table for talks where a potential peace plan can be charted out. But that remains a distant dream, Gautam, given the kind of war theatre we're witnessing in the region, with the Ukrainian forces now claiming more than 1,600 square kilometers of the region in Kursk region, which is in Russia, and with the Russian forces occupying 4 regions in eastern Ukraine. The battle pretty much continues, and the fact that a possible peaceful resolution, as was tried in the Swiss Peace Summit just few months ago, wasn't so successful, even though it saw the attendance of more than 190 countries and 10 other important international organizations. So of course the world is pressing for peace, but how will it be achieved, and where will India stand in that particular mix would be crucial to watch. We're given to understand that India could play a very key role. If you see through the analysis throughout the day as to what is being talked about when it comes to Prime Minister's role and his visit and what all it could possibly achieve, one of the main indicators is given the Indian Prime Minister's political relationship which has evolved over the years with Russia, and the kind of multipolarity India has shown, and of course emerging as a leader of the global South, there is some trust in that kind of relationship and the potential of what the Prime Minister can offer.
Yes, and as far as gestures go, because Jessica's gestures also speak their own language apart from words, and we've seen Prime Minister Modi when he was in Moscow, and we've seen him now with President Zelenskyy as well, there with of course Vladimir Putin, a hug there and a hug here too, and an arm around the shoulder as well, apart from the visit to this place, which is a testimony really to all that has been going on in the conflict that has been unfolding in that country for more than almost 2 years now.
That's correct, and India would also want to emphasize on the fact that it can do a lot and achieve a lot in terms of helping Ukraine with its post-war construction efforts. Now, if estimates are to be believed, Gautam, at this point, in the next few decades, Ukraine would require more than $750 billion, and that is just a recent estimate without inflation adjusted. So, of course, that could be potentially a lot more, and where India could come in and how Indian companies could perhaps help energize the Ukrainian economy again and benefit mutually. The trade between the two, pre-COVID times stood at more than $3 billion. Of course, it reduced massively post-COVID, but that again perhaps has led to the point where the collaboration can be increased and looking at potential sectors where both can mutually benefit. Remember, India was, importing sunflower oil, and how the Black Sea, with the theatre of war at this point, has disrupted various supply chains. So a peaceful resolution to this conflict perhaps would be in the best interest of not just Europe and the West collectively, but also for Asia and the general security architecture of the region.
Yes, and there's a fate of a lot of Indian students who studied in Ukraine as well. In balance, there's an Indian community there too that already has greeted Prime Minister Modi when he reached Kyiv. Their fate too hangs in balance as far as seeking a resolution to this conflict is concerned, and those must also be on Prime Minister Modi's mind when he is in Kyiv.
That's correct. Before the conflict escalated in the region, there were more than 19,000 students, medical students in Ukraine, who you'd recall had to be evacuated, and India had conducted an operation called Operation Ganga back then to bring back the Indian students safely through Poland. And India, particularly with its strengthened ties with Poland, was able to achieve that in that particular very, very critical moment where there were missiles barraging all over. So of course that particular point did prove to the effect that India's balanced ties has been able to offer it the kind of necessary help at a time when it required it the most. But beyond that, there is a lot of exploration in terms of how this particular program of students as well traveling to Ukraine can be sort of revived, because as you know, the students who returned to India had to leave their studies midway and were finding it difficult to sort of align with the current curriculum timelines back home. So a lot of those students did suffer as well, and it would be in interest of those who now go back. And remember, India has sent its skilled workforce, particularly medical students who are serving as doctors in Ukraine. So that particular cooperation and that mutual cooperation further should be enhanced.
Well, certainly, Jessica, and we await to hear more about what is happening in Kyiv between India and Ukraine when its two top leaders are meeting there. And we'll, of course, take updates from you later on as well in the day. Thanks for joining us for the time being.